trends come and go, but few trends ascend so quickly and die so suddenly as the young adult dystopian craze of the 2010s. Unless you were living under a rock between the years of 2008 and 2015, you're probably aware of the teen dystopian sensation The Hunger Games, which spawned a blockbuster movie franchise and a host of knockoffs. This giant booming success led to an equally booming crash around 2016 or so, when the market's oversaturation dried up the potential for new YA dystopian books to thrive. For the last several years, authors wanting to write YA dystopia for traditional publication have been out of luck, with most publishers unwilling to take a chance on new books in this genre. But just this year, we have started to see a trickle of YA books from major publishers that are calling themselves dystopian again. So could it be? Is YA dystopia making a comeback? My name is Ellie Blackwood. I'm a sci-fi and fantasy author in progress, and I was a massive YA dystopian novel fan back in the day. And today we're going to explore the question of whether YA dystopia is rising from the grave. The YA dystopian craze coincided with my middle school and early high school years, so I was the perfect age to become obsessed with these books. And obsess I did. I devoured a metric ton of the YA dystopian novels on the market. So if there's any chance that YA dystopia is coming back, I want to know all about it for the sake of my nostalgia. And if it is coming back, what makes modern YA dystopian books different from the ones that dominated in the 2010s? This video will tackle all these questions and more, including with the help of a very special guest. If you were a fan of YA dystopian books, I would love to hear which ones were your favorites in the comments. And if you're interested in video essays about books, science fiction, Doctor Who, and all that goodness, be sure to subscribe to my channel. And if you want to get access to my videos 3 days before anyone else, as well as keep up with my other projects and nerdy content, be sure to subscribe to my monthly newsletter, which you can find linked in the description. To properly understand the new generation of YA dystopian novels, let's begin by covering the original YA dystopian trend and why it crashed and burned so badly the first time around. The dystopian subgenre of science fiction has a long and distinguished history in literary canon. Classic 20th century dystopian novels such as George Orwell's 1984, Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451, and Aldous Huxley's Brave New World reflected contemporary fears around the societal upheaval from World War II and later the Cold War. When fiction for children and teenagers became a thing, it's no surprise that authors started crafting dystopian tales for this demographic too. YA dystopian novels began appearing in the latter half of the 20th century, most notably Lois Lowry's 1993 novel The Giver. But the genre exploded into wild heights of popularity with the release of The Hunger Games in 2008. After the commercial success of The Hunger Games, a flood of YA dystopian titles hit the market. Some of the most successful included Veronica Roth's Divergent, Ali Condi's Matched, James Dashner's The Maze Runner, Lauren Oliver's Delirium, Kira Cass's The Selection, Tahira Mafi's Shatter Me, and Marie Lu's Legend. Scott Westerfeld's YA dystopian series Uglies actually began coming out 3 years before The Hunger Games, but it saw a resurgence in popularity after the YA dystopian craze really got going. Many of these dystopian stories generated blockbuster movie franchises, with The Hunger Games of course proving the most successful. A huge part of YA dystopia's popularity was the high concept nature of many of these novels. High concept is a slightly nebulous book marketing term, but it basically means that the novel has a highly commercial premise that can be summed up in one sentence. For example, what if you got government-mandated cosmetic surgery at 16 to make you all look the same? What if a government algorithm selected the perfect partner for you when you turned 17? What if love was illegal and all 18-year-olds got a procedure to remove their ability to love? And there's also a government-run matching algorithm. What if Big Maze? I actually really despise the Maze Runner series, but that's a topic for another video that I might not have the strength to make because it would require me reading the series again. If enough of you comment asking for a Maze Runner roast though, I might go for it. Despite their often unique sounding premises, YA dystopian novels developed a slew of common tropes and themes. Some of these tropes are found in a lot of coming-of-age science fiction and fantasy stories, like the protagonist falling in love, the protagonist being the chosen one, adult characters being either useless or the villains, the protagonist's parents being dead or dying over the course of of the novel, etc. But some were weirdly specific to this particular genre. A non-exhaustive list of elements that one could expect to see across many YA dystopian novels included people getting sorted into some kind of government-mandated category, a test or trial or procedure that the government requires children to take when they turn a certain age. The evil government gets taken down by just a single teenager and a few of their friends. Love triangles where the female main character must choose between two different attractive guys. This standard collection of tropes was ripe for parody. One of the most memorable for me was the Dystopian YA novel Twitter account run by writer Dana Schwartz, which racked up almost 60,000 followers by posting apparent snippets from a typical dystopian YA novel. It's the night before my 17th birthday, which means in a few hours, I'll have to face the mysterious test to determine my future. I'm plain looking and shy. There's no way two guys would be fighting for my love, right? This world is more confusing than it first appeared. My entire life played out before my eyes like a movie split into two parts right when it started getting exciting. I also fondly remember when Saturday Night Live poked fun at the genre with its Group Hopper skit, which currently has 8.5 million views on YouTube. While YA dystopian novels pretty much by definition involve an evil tyrannical government and a teenager tasked with taking said government down, the actual political commentary of many of these novels was, shall we say, lacking. The governments in these stories would often be cartoonishly evil, with authors shying away from properly engaging with real-world issues. The sorting of people into arbitrary categories that often took place in these worlds was a nod to real-life systems of oppression. But they didn't say anything of substance about our modern world, despite often being explicitly set in the United States or another modern country. The protagonists of these stories were generally white, straight, cisgender, and non-disabled, rather than members of demographics that are more at risk of being marginalized in our modern society. For the most part, these books were more about the aesthetics of oppression and rebellion, rather than engaging with real-life parallels with the modern world. The dystopian YA novel Twitter account highlighted this succinctly after the 2016 election of Donald Trump, when it tweeted, "I, an attractive white girl, am the person most at risk under this authoritarian regime." Indeed, a big part of the reason that The Hunger Games has aged so well compared to other YA dystopian novels is not just because it was the first to break out, but because it presents a coherent, if somewhat simplistic, political commentary. Subsequent additions to the genre gained traction largely because of their hooky concepts, rather than because of their ability to say something important about the real world through the lens of fiction. That's not to say that every book has to have something deep to say about society or politics. Some books can just be entertainment. But dystopia is an inherently political genre, and after the dozenth book that claims to be the next Hunger Games but has no substantive political commentary to offer, the whole endeavor of YA dystopia starts to feel like a cynical cash grab. And eventually, the whole thing came crashing down. After about 2015 or 2016, YA dystopian novels were firmly dead. There are a few factors that may have caused that, the most immediately obvious being market saturation. Publishing goes through natural cycles where publishers will release loads of a specific type of book, readers will gobble them up, and then get bored. And suddenly, those same publishers won't touch that genre with a 10-foot pole for at least a few years. So after the 10 gazillionth Hunger Games knockoff, the dystopian bubble naturally burst. Additionally, increased attention to real-life systemic injustice in the US due to events like the Black Lives Matter protests starting in 2014 and the 2016 election of open fascist Donald Trump may have made fake made-up dystopias about oppressed white people feel a bit hollow. Since the dystopian novel trend was largely American-centric, with most of the popular authors in the genre being American, US politics had an outsized impact on the direction of the genre. Some extra soil was shoveled over the grave of YA dystopian novels thanks to the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020, which led to a reluctance to read books about plagues in general, something that some YA dystopian novels heavily dealt with. On the dystopian YA Twitter account, Dana Schwartz even referenced the pandemic by tweeting, "This account was supposed to be a joke, not a preview." In this sort of environment, it's no wonder that the shallow aesthetics of many YA dystopian novels started to feel hollow to readers at large, even to more privileged readers who had only just begun to reckon with how society mistreats others. Between 2016 2016 and 2024, major publishers did release a few books with elements reminiscent of YA dystopia, but they tended to have more magical elements and be positioned as fantasy. Victoria Aveyard's 2015 Red Queen series, Neil Shusterman's 2017 Arc of a Scythe series, Donielle Clayton's 2018 novel The Bells, and Lauren Roberts' 2023 novel Powerless are some examples of YA fantasy books that perhaps would have been marketed primarily as dystopian YA if they released in 2011. The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, a prequel to the Hunger Games, released in 2020 and received a movie adaptation in 2023. And in 2024, it was announced that another Hunger Games prequel book and movie adaptation, Sunrise on the Reaping, was in the works. Between 2018 and 2020, the author of the Shatter Me trilogy, Tahara Mafi, released 3 more books in the series to decent commercial success. And in August of 2024, Mafi announced that there would be a new Shatter Me spin-off series beginning in April 2025 with Watch Me. Similarly, Scott Westerfeld released a spin-off series from his original Uglies trilogy. The original Uglies book also got a Netflix film adaptation that released in September of 2024, and it was certainly a movie that exists. But the continued middling success of existing YA dystopian franchises doesn't guarantee that there's room for more voices in the genre. After all, it's easy to tap into nostalgia for something that people already love, but it's harder to get them to take a chance on something new. But starting in 2024, there are signs that a shift is happening. The first sign that YA dystopian books may not be totally dead came with the US publication of Snow Globe by So-Young Park. This book told the story of an icy world and a girl who must navigate a domed city of celebrity and secrets. The book was originally published in Korean in 2020, but Penguin Random House commissioned a version in English that released in February of 2024, translated by Jungmin Lee Comfort. And they specifically used the term dystopian to market the novel. Taken alone, Snow Globe was a bit of an outlier. During the summer of 2020, a time when most publishers were not touching dystopian novels, the manuscript for Snow Globe landed on the desk of an editor at a Penguin imprint who found a strange kind of escapism in the story. The editor was quoted as saying in Publishers Weekly, "Everyone was really scared and sad. We didn't know what our future was. I was like, this manuscript brings me joy to talk about. It's so fresh and different that I feel like this is a gamble worth taking, and so I made an offer." But Snow Globe soon had the company of other YA dystopian books from the domestic English-speaking market. October 8, 2024 saw the publication of not one but 2 books from imprints of Penguin that were explicitly marketed as YA dystopia, Fledgling by S.K. Ali and The Dividing Sky by Jill Tew. And this trickle of new novels marketed as YA dystopia will be joined by a few others next year from major publishers. Fantasy author Chloe Gong recently announced a YA dystopian trilogy, Coldwire, that will begin releasing in 2025 from Simon & Schuster. And fantasy author Ava Reid is also releasing a YA dystopian novel in 2025, Fable for the End of the World, published by HarperCollins. Crucially, while many of these new YA dystopian books are written by established best-selling authors, they are not written by authors who have ever published a YA dystopia before. The genre seems to slowly but surely be making space for new voices to tell their stories. And a new generation of writers means that these stories are not exactly your typical Hunger Games knockoff. To help me parse out what's so different about these new YA dystopian novels and why they might be coming back now, I roped in a very special guest.
Hey! How are you?
Jill Tew made her publishing debut with The Dividing Sky, which released to multiple starred trade reviews and was selected as an Indie Next pick. The story is set in a future hyper-capitalist Boston, where rich people pay for others to act as proxies for almost every aspect of their lives, not just to do their shopping or take care of their kids, but also to maintain their personal relationships, create exciting memories, and read books and watch movies for them. The protagonist, Liv Newman, is an emo proxy who collects happy memories for her rich clients to experience in convenient bite-sized chunks. But she also illegally sells memories to people in her community. And when law enforcement gets wind of this, they send a handsome rookie to track her down.
I want to begin sort of at the beginning and ask you what drew you to YA dystopian books and made you want to write one?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so yeah, to me, I think dystopian, beyond just doing the cool sci-fi stuff, I think dystopian books are one of those genres that really makes it easy to take a hard look at society and elements of society and be kind of critical. You can take things that are even, maybe not harmless, but, just a little bit, insidious, and say, okay, if this goes on, if we blow this up and, magnify this into this being kind of all of what society is about, here's what it's going to look like. And by the way, like, we're in trouble. You know, in The Dividing Sky, the big thing that I'm focusing on is this fixation on productivity that we seem to have today, right? That we think of ourselves and our time as inherently valuable only insofar as it goes to be productive for, you know, usually somebody else, but occasionally for ourselves. And so, yeah, I really wanted to call that out and to think about, you know, what it looks like when technology advances to a point where we can really, you know, outsource almost all of our lives to other people and use other people to help ourselves get ahead, you know, in the workplace. To me, the only thing that's standing in the way of, you know, the world I describe is that the technology hasn't caught up yet, right? But I feel like, you know, when I describe and I kind of pitch the book to people, and I say, yeah, Liv's job is to read books and watch movies with other people. People go, oh, I want that. I'm like, no, you're not supposed to want that. Like, you're not supposed to want an emo proxy. Like, you're supposed to, like, that's like the cautionary tale of the story. But everybody, I think, hears that and can relate to, like, oh, I wish I had time to read every book in my TBR, right?
Were you a fan of, like, you know, Hunger Games era dystopia? Was that sort of something that you were into?
Oh, big time. So yeah, I came to the Hunger Games maybe a couple years late because I was in college, and actually it was Divergent, the Divergent movie, you know, a couple of years later that really like sparked that like fire in me again. That was like, oh wait, like I want to write books for a living. I was feeling really worn down by my career, and some friends after work were like, hey, let's go see a movie. And I went to that theater, watched Divergent, and walking back, I remembered this love that I had had for sci-fi stories as a kid, and my love for storytelling that I, you know, put to the side when it came time to like make a practical career choice. And so that was the night when I went home, and instead of opening up my laptop to like keep making spreadsheets and PowerPoint slides, I began like plotting out a story that actually ended up getting my agent like 7 years later.
That's so cool. It's kind of poetic in a way that it was a YA dystopian story that got you back into writing, and now you're using your writing talent to revive the genre.
One of the factors that has allowed YA dystopian novels to return is presumably because the market saturation has evened out by now. People are starting to feel nostalgia for the kinds of books they read as young teenagers, and a whole new generation of teens have come of age and are ready for some exciting new stories. That's basically what happened with vampire romance novels after a glut of Twilight knockoffs put a stake through the heart of the original vampire trend in the early 2010s. Publishers wouldn't take teen vampire books for around a decade, but in the last couple of years they've firmly made a comeback and are regularly hitting bestseller lists again. But I was interested to see whether Jill thought there were other reasons for dystopia making a comeback now, and whether she thinks there's anything different about this new iteration of the genre.
So one of the reasons I was really excited to talk to you is that The Dividing Sky is, to my knowledge, one of the first young adult books releasing from a major publisher in a very, very long time that is explicitly marketed as YA dystopia. Why do you think people are interested in this genre again?
It's a really good question. I mean, so for one, I think people have always been interested. The market was like, hey, like there's been a glut of these, and they're like, you could argue that like quality was devolving. Like it was kind of becoming like a money grab situation where it's like, oh, if I call it dystopian, then everyone will, you know. So I think there was just kind of this like quality control issue, which I understand. I also think dystopian in some ways is kind of one of those genres, almost kind of like horror, where it makes it kind of safe to explore, you know, things like the horrors of reality, right? In a way that feels controlled, in a way where you feel like at the end of the day, you know, the forces of good will win out. Yeah, I think more and more people are kind of like becoming aware of some like the more like dystopian elements of society today, and like want to call those out and want to talk about them and have a dialogue. And I think, you know, dystopian stories are a really good way to kind of spark those things in a way, especially for teens, I think, in a way that feels accessible and maybe a little bit safer.
In your opinion, based on the fact that you wrote one of them, what makes this new crop of YA dystopian books different to the ones from the 2010s?
Yeah, I love this question. I think, you know, for one, like, it's definitely more global and diverse in nature, right? I feel like there's this, like a wave of dystopian conversations that I think is really trying to amend one of the earlier criticisms of the YA dystopian boom, which was that it kind of felt like people were saying that dystopia is what happens when things that happen to people of color and people around the world every day happen to white people, right? So it's like, oh no, could you imagine if this happened to us? It's like, wake up, like this is lots of people's like daily reality. And so I love that like more diverse voices are coming into this genre and adding a new perspective.
Indeed, the majority of new YA dystopian novels are written by authors of colour and feature main characters whose backgrounds mirror their own. While some of the big 2010s YA dystopian novels were written by non-white authors, the genre as a whole was still very white-centric. Another new YA dystopian author who has publicly reflected on the opportunity to create space in the genre for her community's perspective is S.K. Ali, the author of Fledgling, who previously found success with her highly acclaimed contemporary novels. Fledgling features a divided world where the people of Upper Earth live in high-tech luxury and the people of Lower Earth are scraping by to survive. A wedding between the Princess of Upper Earth and the Crown Prince of Lower Earth promises to unite the two realms to create peace, but it soon becomes clear that this promised peace isn't what it seems. In an interview with Envy, Ali explained, "I hope to be part of the writers who are from a colonized background and adding their voices to this genre. I think it's time that we see our takes on this genre because it's been retold to us from people who haven't experienced it." That's not to say that these new YA dystopian novels wholesale copy systems of oppression from the real world. Fledgling and The Dividing Sky actually both take place in a sort of post-racial world where there are racially diverse characters at all levels of society. The worlds in these books are unlike our own in many ways, and yet they are similar enough that they cut to the heart of real issues in our modern society from the perspective of authors whose voices have not historically been amplified. It is perhaps because of marginalized authors adding their voices to the YA dystopian genre that we are starting to see the rectifying of another common criticism of the titles that were popular in the 2010s.
One of the criticisms of a lot of previous, 2010s YA dystopian novels is that some of them are more about the aesthetic of the dystopia than what they're actually trying to say about our current society.
Yeah.
And this is even true of some YA dystopian novels that I really truly loved.
Yep, same.
There's a lot of YA dystopian novels where you look at the society that's been created and you think, well, how could our society possibly have gotten there?
Yeah, I would never name names or titles or whatever, but absolutely. And I feel like that is one reason why the genre kind of petered out, because you start off with a banger. The Hunger Games, it was just she made point after point after point about exactly what the underlying sickness was with our society at the time, and even still, and it still resonates when you watch those movies, read those books, and you're like, yep, same old crap, and even worse today, right? But yeah, then I think there was an element of watering down a little bit, and I think then publishing in particular saw the dollar signs and was oh, it's about the vibe, or we could, they kind of missed what made it so impactful, I think, for readers and for the market. They went after the aesthetic and the vibes. And so, yeah, you got some that were okay, this is fun, but this is a setup that is just for the plot, right? I hope that, the few that are squeaking through today are squeaking through because they have something to say. I'm excited to see what people are saying, and, we have a whole slew of different issues, a decade and a half later. And I'm excited to see what people are pointing out, and kind of criticizing and asking people to pay attention to. So I think it's going to be great.
While it's a little early to say whether every single new YA dystopian novel will be heavily centered around theme rather than aesthetic, it does seem to be shaping up that way from the books we've seen so far. Jill and I mentioned how The Hunger Games has always had a coherent political angle that a lot of 2010s YA dystopia lacked, and its author, Suzanne Collins, seems to be keeping that in mind with her future installments too. When the next Hunger Games novel, Sunrise on the Reaping, was first announced in June of 2024, Collins released a brief statement that was not about the plot or which fan-favorite characters would return, but about what she hoped to accomplish thematically with the book. She said, "With Sunrise on the Reaping, I was inspired by David Hume's idea of implicit submission, and, in his words, the easiness with which the many are governed by the few. The story also lent itself to a deeper dive into the use of propaganda and the power of those who control the narrative. The question, real or not real, seems more pressing to me every day." S.K. Ali's dystopian novel Fledgling is also concerned with narrative, specifically from a colonial perspective. It asks the questions, what do different people's narratives look like? Who gets to write the official record book of history? And it explores record-keeping and truth-telling as a crucial part of resistance to oppression. On the podcast Tight Wires with Hiba Tahir, Ali was asked to explain what she most hoped readers would take away from Fledgling. Ali responded, "Independent thought, listening to stories from first hand, listening to the people being talked about. And I bring this up in terms of Palestinian voices, for example. A lot of times we don't get to hear from Palestinians talking about their experiences, and others are called to speak for them. I would like readers to think about that oft-repeated phrase, the voiceless, because there is no community that's really voiceless, it's just that nobody's passed them the mic." With this angle in mind, Fledgling takes urgent real-world issues and weaves them into a fictional dystopian narrative that is complex and nuance but still easy for teens to digest. And I wouldn't be surprised if that attention to theme becomes the rule rather than the exception for this new wave of YA dystopian novels. While I had Jill trapped in my lair, I was interested in learning what she hoped to bring to the genre with The Dividing Sky.
In specific to The Dividing Sky, what excites you about what The Dividing Sky brings to the genre of YA dystopia?
I hope that it can help spark, more of a conversation around this idea that, productivity is one of the best and easiest ways to measure, human life and like the value of the human experience. It's also tied together, right? When I think about productivity and I think about the things we do to kind of like keep ourselves going through the drudgery of like continuing the grind, right? Like, I don't think it's an accident that social media has taken off in this way that kind of like keeps us like just satiated enough to think that we're like happy and like joyful and like keep going, right? We, outsource our, food delivery and all these different things. I think, I think that it's important to kind of call out the way that when each of us pushes for that productivity, we end up like sacrificing part of ourselves and like parts of each other, I think, to this sort of like machine.
So the thing that a lot of older YA dystopian novels did is there's this single heroine, it's usually a female character, usually this like single heroine who's sort of single-handedly taking down the evil government. But The Dividing Sky has a really heavy focus on the power of community and creating systems of care outside the oppressive system. So I was wondering what led you to take that route with this story.
Yeah, I mean, I think for one, like, readers are more savvy now. They know that, like, a 16-year-old girl is not gonna, no matter how good she is with her bow and arrow, it's not gonna happen. Realistically, it just kind of was born out of the theme, as you mentioned, right? So if we think of, one side of this argument, what Life Corp would propose as saying, productivity is all that matters. You as an individual have worth as far as your productivity and like how much you contribute to this corporation. That leads to people isolating themselves and kind of saying like, I need you only insofar as it helps me get ahead, right? So I will use you to like deliver my groceries. I will use you to do whatever. But if you waste my time, like you're cut off, because the only thing that matters, the only way that my life matters is if I'm productive. So if we take the opposite of that argument and we say, actually, like, humans are like intrinsically valuable and they have inherent worth, and it means something to be on this planet like with each other, right? If I believe that like you have inherent worth, then like I'm going to treat you with care and I'm going to care for you and about you, and we're going to work together to care for others, right? And it just kind of naturally flows out of that, this idea that like we have time for each other, we have time to sit and talk or listen to music or make art or garden or like cook a meal together, because like that is intrinsically valuable.
Overall, what struck me when I read The Dividing Sky and Fledgling is that they don't offer simple answers to cartoonishly evil governments. Instead, they offer worlds starkly inspired by real-world issues. And they focus on how hope, love, and justice can prevail even against hugely powerful forces. In many ways, they feel like books written to meet people, especially young people, where they are today. There's a lot to feel a sense of doom about in the modern world, but through YA dystopian fiction, authors are offering up ways to overcome the doom and move forward with hope for the future. And they're doing it in a teen-friendly way with romance, excitement, and adventure.
Oh, I'm so glad we get fun dystopia again. We are so back!
Yes, we are so back. I'm so excited. And I can't wait for like Fledgling, Chloe Gong's book, Coldwire, and all the other ones that are coming out too. I just feel like there's a new batch of like things to say, and I can't wait for, all the conversations that we'll have around these books.
I am very grateful to Jill for chatting with me for this video. It was a super interesting conversation, and I unfortunately had to cut a lot of great stuff in the edit. If you're interested in seeing our full unedited conversation, the link to the Instagram live recording is in the description. So now that we've taken a look at this new burgeoning iteration of YA dystopia, where can we expect it to go from here? The emergence of a few books in a previously dead genre does not guarantee that YA dystopian novels are once again headed for blockbuster commercial status. But even if none of these new YA dystopian books reach the heights of the Hunger Games, perhaps this is a sign that the genre might see some stability moving forward. Instead of a cycle of massive boom and massive bust, we might see a quieter, steady stream of YA dystopian novels that a whole new generation of teens can fall in love with. People can make fun of the classic YA dystopian tropes all they want, but but the fact is that new and innovative stories can still emerge from this genre. This new crop of YA dystopian stories aren't just a collection of tired tropes with the aesthetic of political commentary slapped over the top. Instead, these authors have real things to say about the state of the world, and they feel drawn to reflecting that through fiction that still contains some of the fun tropes and romance that readers enjoyed about the teen dystopian tales of yore. These books ask the question, how can people move forward with hope in a dystopian world that is both very different and very similar to our own? What kind of world can young people build for themselves with a little imagination? And if authors can now have the space to write these stories without being told that their work is unmarketable and will never see the light of day, that's a win as far as I'm concerned. So what are your thoughts on the return of YA dystopia? Have you read any of these newer additions to the genre, or are you thinking of giving them a try? Let me know in the comments. Remember to subscribe to my channel for more explorations of books and sci-fi, and join my newsletter for additional content and early access to my YouTube videos. The link to that is in the description. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.